Hello and welcome to Why Wasn't It Better? I'm your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm your co-host, Anton Paras.
Dark magic, undead armies, and a pig that can see the future. The Black Cauldron was Disney's boldest, weirdest swing of the 1980s. It was intended to push the studio into new territory, and yet it became a notorious flop instead. Was it a misunderstood gem, or just too grim for its own good?
Ooh, the Black Cauldron.
Yeah, we're talking about a real lemon today, Anton.
I think you're being really nice calling it like a lemon. Isn't this more like a lemon that's been sitting outside for like a week?
Or 40 years. Because this movie is 40 years old.
Or is it, or what is it? It's a lemon that was sitting out for 9 years too long?
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
You know, just a reminder to the listeners, if you love what we do here and you want to help us keep the mics on and the ideas flowing, consider supporting us on Patreon. It's the best way to help us grow and keep bringing you the content that you enjoy. Plus, you'll get some awesome extras. We're talking early access to episodes, ad-free content, bonus content, maybe even a few other surprises. Your support makes a huge difference and it helps us keep making this show better every week. So head on over to patreon.com/WWIB official and become a supporter today. That's all the admin I have, Anton.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so we got a pig that can see into the future.
The tagline is hidden by darkness, guarded by witches, discovered by a boy, stolen by a king. Whoever owns it will rule the world or destroy it. Set in the mythical land of Prydain during the early Middle Ages, the film centers on a wicked king known as the Horned King, who hopes to secure an ancient magical cauldron that will aid him in his desire to conquer the world. He is opposed by a young assistant pig herder named Taran, the young princess Ilonwi? Not sure how to pronounce that, even though I've watched the movie twice in the past week. The harp-playing bard Fludor Flam, and a friendly wild creature named Gurgi.
Gurgi.
Yes, who seek to destroy the cauldron to prevent the Horned King from ruling the world. It was released on July 24th, 1985 by Walt Disney Productions. It was directed by Ted Berman and Richard Rich. The screenplay was written by, prepare yourself here, Ted Berman, Vance Jerry, Joe Hale, David Jonas, Ray Morita, Richard Rich, Art Stevens, Al Wilson, and Peter Young. And it is based on The Book of Three and The Black Cauldron by Lloyd Alexander, featuring the voices of Grant Bardsley, Susan Sheridan, Freddie Jones, Nigel Hawthorne, Arthur Mallet, John Biner, Lindsay Rich, Brandon Call, Gregory Levinson, Ada Rice Marin, some other people, John Hurt, and it was narrated by the one, the only John Huston. The budget was $44 million. Adjusted for inflation, that's $129 million. And the box office was $21 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is only $61 million. Anton, why did we choose the Black Cauldron?
Well, it's important to note that this is a Disney film. We always love to talk about Disney on the pod. But at the same time, this is a film that carries with it a very interesting legacy. This is not only the 40th anniversary of the film, it's also a film that carries with it the interesting title of like almost ending the Disney company as we know it.
The Black Sheep.
The Black Sheep. Maybe that was another title for it.
You could have called it that.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen this before. Had you?
I had. I saw this as a kid because I was lucky. I don't know.
Were you? Really?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I don't know if that's like, because it actually, like, it is kind of happenstance. It's like, how rare is it, like, you get a chance to see the film as a kid? Just because, like, it's by all means was rejected by Disney for how bad it was. I mean, it's kind of amazing that it's on Disney Plus now.
They definitely have softened their stance on it because you're right. They tried to bury it for a long time. I didn't even realize this, and this probably explains why I never saw it as a kid. It was not even released on video until 1998.
Right, and like, to be fair, Disney's VHS release system was very obscure, very gated in terms of what they released. So there's a lot of films kind of under that same belt of you were locked in the Disney vault, you weren't getting out just so Disney could kind of own the VHS rights. But this film in particular, there's being locked in the Disney vault. And then there's like being locked in like Fort Knox, like 100 feet in the ground, you know?
They ignored it.
Absolutely.
It's almost impossible to imagine this now, but there was a period, like you were hinting at, Disney Studios in 1985 was in a major financial crisis. This film was almost a death blow to them. It was something of a swing for them because they were trying to reach out to like teenage fans of fantasy novels, which were quite popular at the time. You know, this was the era of Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
It was a gamble that would prove disastrous. You know, we mentioned the box office numbers. I mean, it lost them an unbelievable amount of money, and it was such a bomb. It apparently put the future of their animation department in jeopardy, which is, I said it before. I mean, it's almost impossible to think about that now.
It's nuts. There's a lot to the legacy of this film that we'll talk about in the production history, just around really this was like a changing of the guard. This was a loss of identity for the company. This was the I'd say corporate strategy of the future execs at B really dictating what the future of Disney will be, all because of a movie like this.
We're going to talk about all of that. This is definitely what you would call a cult classic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't know how many people who have seen this, though. You know, you bring it up, and it doesn't even seem like a lot of people have heard of it, which is pretty rare for a Disney film. You know, all their animated stuff, even the lesser stuff, is pretty well known.
If you're a true like hardcore Disney fan, you're familiar with it. But I'm really excited today to probably introduce this to the more casual fan. And like even for if you're not like necessarily a casual Disney fan, if you're a movie fan, this is fascinating film history.
Fascinating to read about. I don't know if it's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
That's another thing. Yeah, like I said, I had never seen this before, or at least I have no memory of it. Also worth pointing out, they didn't even release this on Blu-ray.
Yeah, because would it look that much better?
Well, you mentioned how it's on Disney Plus, which of course it is. It's in 4K, so they gave it the remaster. Did it help?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Well, let's get into the production history of it then. This is, of course, based on a series of novels written by Lloyd Alexander in the 1960s called The Chronicles of Prydain. Have you read any of them?
I have not, but I am familiar with the series. I do know folks that really enjoy the series.
I haven't either. So this film represents my only real familiarity with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to say, it ain't great. Disney optioned Alexander's 5-volume series in 1971. The novels themselves are inspired by Welsh mythology. According to Disney animator Joe Hale, quote, Disney at the time were not appealing to teenagers who were the bulk of the audience in the theaters. They wanted to make a PG-rated movie that would attract an older audience, end quote. This would, of course, end up being Disney's first animated film to be rated PG. According to Ollie Johnson and Frank Thomas, who were two of Disney's 9 old men, which is basically their original team of animators going back, you know, all the way, I think, to like, what, the 1920s?
Yeah, 1920s. The very important, cornerstone basis to the Disney company.
Absolutely. They supported the film adaptation, and they said that if it had been done properly, it might have been as good as Snow White.
Big statements, but it's interesting. We should put a pin on that. They really believed in this vision and project, right?
At one point, yes. Because of the numerous storylines and with over 30 major characters in the original novels, several story artists and animators worked on the film's development throughout the 1970s. When The Rescuers was released in 1977, The Black Cauldron was going to be their next animated feature. They were intending to release this in 1980, but by August 1978, they pushed it back to Christmas 1984 due to their inability to animate realistic human characters. And then The Fox and the Hound ended up being their next feature, which came out in 1981. Also, I might have this out of order, but 1978-79 is also when Don Bluth left and took a whole bunch of animators with him.
Yep. And we all know that Don Bluth, of course, taught through the Disney way, but also very influential with his own films. We covered one of his films, not a great film, but did cover Titan AE.
We have more. coming.
Yeah. Yeah. But a legend.
Absolutely a legend. Meanwhile, Disney CEO Ron Miller hired Rosemary Ann Sisson as they wanted an experienced British screenwriter for the film.
Animator John Musker was the film's initial director. He was assigned to expand several sequences in the first act, but they were eventually deemed too comedic. Musker explains, quote, "The older people I was working with didn't like any of my ideas," end quote. Miller brought in Joe Hale to serve as producer after deciding the original producer, Art Stevens, was not appropriate to supervise the project. The actual production did not begin until 1980. This was the first Disney animated feature since 1955, with The Lady and the Tramp to be made without Don Bluth. A young animator named Tim Burton worked on the film. His work was discarded at one point as the producers wanted a Sleeping Beauty look for the film. Hale and the story team heavily revised the film, by which they combined the stories of the first two books. They also made some considerable changes, which led to Sisson's departure as she developed creative differences with Hale and the directors. Musker and Ron Clements, also citing creative differences, were removed from the project and began development on The Great Mouse Detective. The Black Cauldron is notable for being Disney's first animated feature film to incorporate computer-generated imagery in its animation for bubbles, a boat, a floating orb of light, and the cauldron itself. It was the first Disney animation film to be processed in 70 millimeter, and unlike most other Disney films, the film only contained the musical score instead of having any lyrics, and it was composed by Elmer Bernstein. And that is our production history for The Black Cauldron.
We're going to continue the production history in our first discussion reason of why wasn't it better. Anton, this film is a bit of a mess, and it was a very big failure. Let's try to figure out why. I think there's some very obvious reasons that we can go over, and there may be some more non-obvious reasons that we can talk about. This film had a very lengthy, troubled production. Where you last left off in the timeline, we started way back in 1971 when they bought the rights to the book series. This film did not come out until 1985. Why did it take so long? A lot of individuals who worked on this, key individuals who worked on this, were either quit or had been fired. Almost an entire animation team, one of the producers, the primary screenwriter, etc., etc. I mentioned this when I introed the film. No less than 9 screenwriters are credited here. That's usually not a good sign for any film, let alone this one. And then you mentioned how this film's production started in 1980, so it took them 5 years to get this out.
Yeah, it's
not good.
Not good. Not good.
It would have been worth it if it had made a boatload of money and if it gotten good reviews, neither of which it achieved.
Yeah, I think that when it comes down to all of the changing of the hands, that's where it really muddles the end. That's going to muddle the end product no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And whatever original vision was on the very get-go was like, hey, let's take this high fantasy series. We're not doing anything like that at Disney right now. I think this would be really great. I think like that as a concept is really smart. Once you put in all those production changes, that vision changes with each handoff. And it's very clear at the end. It's like there's just a lot of compromises once you get to the end product.
At a higher level, you know how this was originally scheduled for Christmas 1984? That's when they were hoping to release this. That was a very pivotal year for Disney in another way. Now, we have talked about this a little bit on other episodes about some of the individuals involved at the highest levels of, Disney's hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Ron Miller. He had been president of the company since 1980, and worth pointing out, he was Walt Disney's son-in-law. He had been named CEO the year before in 1983. Now, under his leadership, the company became the target of corporate raiders and a couple of different takeover attempts. Many influential shareholders quickly grew unhappy with his leadership as CEO. Again, it's hard to put this into perspective now because although, Disney certainly had their ups and downs over the years, but I would say it is all but impossible to imagine this company now being the subject of a corporate takeover of some kind. Like, they take over other companies. Nobody's taking over. I don't even know if there's a company I don't even think Apple could take over Disney at this point. You know what I mean?
I mean, that's always a conversation. Yeah, no, it's just it's a very different conversation. And do you feel like by now, like I think Disney's probably learned like, hey, we got to diversify a bit. But then also you could maybe also see like this was like a turning point of acknowledging Disney had maybe moved away from its roots a bit too much.
I think it's a combination of all those things. The big thing about the company then, at least the movie studio, and again, this is unheard of now. They didn't make sequels. They didn't really own any IP. I don't mean their own. I'm not talking about their own films. Like there was no series of films that they were producing. They didn't make their first sequel until The Rescuers Down Under in 1990. Think about that. For their entire existence as a film studio, they didn't make any sequels for about 60 years. Now, there's a whole lot of other reasons why they were in financial woes at the time. Again, hard to imagine now. The parks were doing okay in the 80s, like not amazing, but okay. You could do a whole podcast on that by itself.
Yeah.
Roy Disney and Sid Bass, who was another, huge shareholder in the company, they had Ron Miller ousted and they replaced him with Michael Eisner, who is a name that a lot of moviegoers would be familiar with even today. He had been president of Paramount Pictures since 1976. He also brought over Frank Wells from Warner Brothers. And then the key to this all is Eisner brings Jeffrey Katzenberg with him to serve as the chairman of Disney Studios. We've talked about Katzenberg quite a bit on this podcast before in previous episodes. He's another name that I feel that anyone who is into movies like we are would be very familiar with.
Right. We've talked about Katzenberg already, and there's a very famous DreamWorks book. What is it?
The Men Who Would Be King.
The Men Who Would Be King. Yes.
Great read. I should get you a copy of that, Anton. You'd like it. But the key to all this is where this ties into the Black Cauldron. This was the first time in the history of Disney that the company was not being run by a member of the Disney family. So quite a big deal. Katzenberg's first assignment, which was given to him by Eisner, was fix the animation department, which had been in dire financial straits for some time. And that, of course, meant focusing on the Black Cauldron, which was supposed to come out in Christmas of that year, and it ended up being delayed to July of 85. They had a screening for the rough cut of this film at the studio's private theater in Burbank. This would have been late 1984. And the climactic Cauldron-born sequence, it proved to be way too intense and way too disturbing for the children who were in the audience. And Katzenberg took it upon himself to begin cutting scenes out of the movie without consulting anyone else. So not the director, not the other producers, not the animation department. He just went in the editing room and started taking stuff out. A little bit more on that later. But I think where this becomes big is Joe Hale objected to Katzenberg's demands. Eisner called Katzenberg in the editing room and ordered him to stop. And although Katzenberg did comply, he insisted that the film had to be modified. That's what led to the delay to July of 85. Now, the challenge with this, Anton, is that unlike editing a live-action film where you can use other takes or possibly even, conduct reshoots, which is pretty common in the industry, you can't really do that with animation, at least not back then. No. Everything, if you wanted to add stuff, you had to get the animation department to make it, and that meant time and money.
Nowadays, a lot of that is faster with modern technology, but
right.
You're talking about a time period where it was a very manual process. Already at this point, the animation department was cutting corners, and the folks observed how the animation had suffered. Getting to this point and asking for reshoots, that's going to take a lot of time and process.
Apparently, Katzenberg asked for reshoots, and the animation department had to tell him that's not how it works.
Not how this works.
No.
You know what? Like, I'm convinced that it's true because Katzenberg's a bit of a madman. Famously, it's also the 20th anniversary of a Goofy movie. Katzenberg was known, of course, oversaw that film as well. And would it shock you to hear that he had actually recommended...
Wait, 20th or 30th?
30th, yeah, 30th anniversary. And Katzenberg oversaw that film. And he had, during one of the feedback sessions with the director and animators, actually asked the question, why don't we just have Goofy talk normal in the film? Wouldn't that be better cinematically? That's the kind of... And of course, that threw everyone for a loop. No one wanted to be the one to say no to Katzenberg. That's the kind of person he was. It's like, let's be very pragmatic about this. Necessarily understanding, like, that's a really big decision to ask Goofy to not be Goofy.
He's a polarizing figure for a lot of reasons. I understand it. He's certainly a visionary. I mean, well, we've talked about him before. You could do a whole podcast just on him and Michael Eisner. They cut 12 minutes out of the film. Some of the existing scenes were rewritten and reanimated for continuity. More on that later. I think you can tell what was reanimated. I don't know if I've seen all the deleted scenes. I've at least seen like stills from what was cut out. It involved like character interactions. There was some more violent content, like we talked about earlier, that like the Cauldron born scene at the very end, that was heavily edited. And I think you can really tell because the undead Cauldron born army that is resurrected, they're on screen for what, like 30 seconds?
It's there's a lot of visuals that are still there but don't really have the connecting piece, and already there's a lot of lack of exposition here, which, do we really need to know more about the motivations of the Horn King?
A little bit more would have helped.
Yeah, maybe. I agree.
All these changes also meant that Elmer Bernstein's score, a lot of it was removed. And, Elmer Bernstein, legend at that point. I mean, he had worked on so many films, not just Disney films, but I mean, go back. He had been working in Hollywood for a long, long time. Defenders of this film will tell you that Katzenberg ruined it. Cutting 12 minutes out of a film that ends up being 80 minutes is a lot. I do want to give Katzenberg his flowers, Anton, because, okay, maybe he butchered this film. Maybe he did. But he is the chief architect of the Disney Renaissance.
Yeah, like, let's not be too hasty to say, like, look what he did with this film and criticize Katzenberg too much. You do have to take the good with the bad. The man does have a good eye for, let's call it, quote unquote, quality. And having that eye as a studio exec, strong vision is very important to bring Disney out of this slump. So had to put a rock through the tumbler to smooth it out a bit, but this tumbler was on for quite a bit.
Love him or hate him, he is a creative bulldozer. I mean, he is the driving force. I don't want to say he's the creative force, but he is a big part of why we got The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin King,
Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Did I just say Aladdin King?
The Aladdin King.
The Aladdin King. I meant to say the Aladdin and the Lion King. He also had a major hand in Disney's original partnership with Pixar, which gave us Toy Story. And you said the Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? That was his final contribution to Disney, I think, before he left and co-founded DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg and David Geffen in 1994.
But
let's talk about the story. That's the next reason.
All right, high fantasy. One in the room right now, just you and me. We have an affinity for it, right?
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, gotta love Lord of the Rings.
Chronicles of Narnia, is that high fantasy?
Yeah, it's up there. I really enjoy Dungeons and Dragons, Legend of Zelda, a lot of high fantasy inspiration.
I can see similarities with Dungeons and Dragons here.
Yeah.
To a fault.
No kidding.
One of the problems with this film, I think there are many. I was trying to read about the source material, right? Okay, there's 5 books. And I think one of the mistakes that this film makes is they are taking 2 complete books with elements from the other 3, and they're trying to turn it into a single 80-minute film. I don't know how great of an idea that is.
It's not the first time that you're ever going to have a film studio try to do that. Right?
Nor the last.
I think a really infamous modern take is actually kind of the opposite. It was trying to make 3 movies out of 1 book with The Hobbit.
Ugh.
And extrapolating that mess was a very different sort of Hollywood mess up. But if trying to get that much context out of like one, or trying to get that much value out of 1 book was a mess, trying to basically make like a meatloaf of books into like one film also is not an easy task.
And from what I've read, which is the synopses of the two books, this film does justice to neither of them.
Looking at the details of what occurs in each book, there's so much context that we just don't have. There's so much development that we don't have for each character. Even like the Gurgi character, who's been reduced to like a silly
Gollum knockoff.
Silly Gollum teddy bear knockoff.
What is he?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of creature is he?
He's I don't know. Like,
It's not clear.
It's not. It's really not. He's a Gurgi. It's really not clear.
I'd like to start with the Black Cauldron itself.
Hmm.
The film is called The Black Cauldron, and it is primarily about this magical artifact called the Black Cauldron. It is used to, correct me if I'm wrong, raise the dead and create an unstoppable undead army called the Cauldron Born.
Yep. Okay.
How does it work?
If you willingly sacrifice yourself into it, it stops working.
But you can turn it on by throwing like a dead skeleton body into it.
Some sort of sacrifice, yeah.
And then you can turn it off by sacrificing yourself, which, spoiler alert, Gurgi does this, right?
Yes. But it's unclear because, I mean, clearly we saw with the ending of the film, like, what would have happened to the person that sacrificed themselves.
But what if the Horned King had thrown another skeleton in to the cauldron? Would it have just turned it back on?
Probably. But I think like that's a contingency plan, is like you have to make sure all the baddies are dead so that you can seal away this evil forever. Like it's a really weird. Even then I feel like we only have the context that we have from the film. I've never read the books, so there could be more to this that we don't have.
I'm sure there is. Question for you: is this the only Disney film to feature a suicide? That's what Gurgi does, right? He commits suicide.
Basically, he's just we could mince it any other way, but yeah, he definitely is like, I'm out. I mean, in a very tragic scene. Like I think like it's the most tragic scene, and I think the most it's the one that I remember from like as a kid. It's like Gurgi being like, I don't have any friends, so like you hang out here, I'll jump in.
I'm positive I had never seen this as a kid now, because I feel like I would have remembered this scene at the very least.
Yeah, it's I think I told you, like, even before he chatted, about the recording, that was the scene that I was shown in my TikTok feed, because, I get a lot of animation stuff, and as obscure as the film is, I think that is one of those touching scenes that really sticks with people.
Another problem with the Cauldron. The Cauldron Born, which is this gigantic threat that is looming, right? Which is what happens if the Horned King unleashes the power of the Cauldron, right?
Zombie apocalypse.
They're barely used.
The threat of them is looming.
The threat of them is looming, but they only appear for, I said 30 seconds earlier, kind of as a joke, but it really is only 30 seconds, because then his whole plan collapses. There's no demonstration of their threat.
Okay, now first off, you know how expensive it would be to even just do the Cauldron Born doing all that? Like, I joke, but I'm also like, that's probably why they didn't do it.
The cuts that Katzenberg made to this scene really undermined it, though, because this threat that has been looming for the whole movie, it gets undone in 30 seconds, and then that's it.
Yeah, and I mean, the visuals enough, I think, like, as a kid were scary. Horn King, very scary. I think as an adult, I really would have loved to see more context on as to like how devastating the Cauldron Born really are. But as a kid, like, I feel like already, like, there's a lot of very scary visuals in this film.
Definitely memorable visuals, I'll give it that. Plot question for you. Was the Cauldron, it wasn't destroyed, right?
No.
You can't destroy it.
The Cauldron was not destroyed.
Permanently deactivated?
Nope. Technically, probably still usable.
So anyone could just start all this over again.
Right, but it does have like a circle of protection.
Right.
Not effective circle of protection, but...
Let's talk about the Horn King and the beginning of this film. So the first major plot point of the film is he's trying to get his hands on this oracular pig named Henwen, right? It's not explained how he knows about the pig.
It's not like, I remember watching as a kid and even being like, was I supposed to like watch like a preamble to this to know why the pig's important?
The plot's a mess, because Henwen is the major plot point of the first, like, what would you say, 20, 30 minutes.
I'm pretty sure Henman was the name of the female lead in Kung Pao Enter the Fist.
A nod to this film, perhaps?
Perhaps.
Perhaps. But you agree, like, she's the major plot point until she's not, because it turns out the Horn King doesn't need the pig to find the cauldron.
It's such a misdirect, because it is a pivotal part of the plot that you're introduced to, and then as soon as she just like starts touching water, you're like, I guess this is important, but not to the Horn King.
Terrible writing, because with Taran is the assistant pig keeper, and it just comes out of nowhere. What's his boss's name? Dalwyn?
Something.
He's like, oh yeah, like, by the way, the pig might occasionally give
the
prophecies.
future.
You never know. Just in case.
Yeah.
Would you use the pig for like sports gambling?
It's like, if you always have to be by water, that'd be a little annoying. I think that,
right, but let's say you're Dalwyn, and there's this jousting tournament coming up.
Oh, for sure. Like, hey, come on.
Right.
Everyone knows what they would do if they were Biff in the 80s, okay? No, sorry, if they know what they do if they were Biff in the 2000s.
There's an alternative plot line to the Black Cauldron where Taran ends up running Biffco in the future.
Oh my gosh.
He made all his money betting on jousting.
Smart man. Starting that empire.
Smart. Yeah.
But no, that's not the Taran we got.
It's not the Taran we got.
Yeah.
So you agree the Henwen thing not really explained well?
No, not really explained well. And I think that it just makes sense why it wasn't. I'm sure if anyone read the books, you'd have way more context of like what's occurring, but basically we get introduced to book 3, right? Because like the Black Cauldron was book 3. So then
I think so.
The exposition that we get with the introduction of Henwen really is probably a plot device of the continuation of the story. So presenting a story kind of midway through a series for a kid's film, like, that's a lot of levels of depth that requires much more effective storytelling.
And this film didn't have it, because all the other magical elements in this film, I think, are poorly explained. Like, Taran gets his hand on that magic sword. That's not explained how that works.
Yeah, it's not. But main character's got to have a sword.
Right. Well, they hint at it. They're like, oh, this must have belonged to the former king of this castle. It's like, well, that's not elaborated on. There's supposed to be a romance brewing between him and the princess. By the way, what's she a princess of? It's not explained.
Not clear.
She's just a princess. That's not really developed. None of the plot points are clearly developed in this film.
She's very like Sleeping Beauty-esque looking.
She's kind of the MVP, because if it wasn't for her, Taran's dumbass would still be in that dungeon.
Yeah, I mean, everything about that, this was not the A-Team. Let's be very clear.
No. Was there a single plot point to you that was clearly defined?
No, absolutely not. There are a lot of jokes thrown out, and to have like Gurgi be like the comedic relief that also just kind of bog down any plot that you could have. And by the way, all of these criticisms of the story and what we can fit in and what can't fit in, we only have 80 minutes to tell it, right?
So if you only have 80 minutes, which, by the way, that's normal for a Disney animated film. That's a standard runtime.
Right.
And they have to be efficient. And this is something where I think this film fails for me, is a lot of the old school Disney animated films are some of the most efficient storytelling you'll ever find in any movie.
Yeah, it follows very typical like beats, right? It's a
right.
And you know what? It works. It absolutely works.
Most of the time it does. Like, you think about something like 101 Dalmatians. Think about how much action and story is packed into... That might even be less than 80 minutes. And it tells a complete story. It has a beginning, a middle, and end with characters who have very clear motivations, very clearly defined plot threads that all get wrapped up at the end. This doesn't have any of that. I didn't find any of the magic explained well. I didn't really find any of the characters' motivations explained, or they didn't even attempt to explain what Taran's deal was, or the princess's deal was, or what she was doing there to begin with. I didn't find any of the characters really likable or interesting. Taran is our protagonist, right? He loses Henwen immediately, and I do mean immediately, like within 30 seconds of being tasked by his boss to what he's supposed to take Henwen to, like the forbidden forest or whatever, to protect her. He loses her immediately.
Taran kind of sucks.
He's awful. I asked you this as a joke, but I'm seriously asking you now again. At what point in the film did you forget his name?
I said it as a joke, but also kind of sincerely, like, I'm pretty sure within like the first 10 minutes, it's like, you're just, who? Him? Where's the pig?
He caves to pressure immediately when they're threatening Henwen in the castle. He's just like, oh, fine, I'll tell you how to tell the future. He just gives that information away. Then you have the princess. I can't pronounce her name. She is the real hero, though, because she frees Taran from the dungeon thanks to her magic bauble, which, by the way, the bauble appears and disappears randomly. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. It's not really explained what it does. Magic of some kind, but vague.
Not clear for me either.
And then you have the bard. What's his name? Fludor Flam. I don't know what his deal is. And then we have Gurgi. He's just Gollum, right? I mean,
yeah, he's like he's not as antagonistic as Gollum, right? To be fair.
No, but I mean, I think they were influenced by Gollum with his mannerisms and whatnot.
It was, which is interesting because there was still the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit series films that had predated this one. And
yes, we reviewed the Lord of the Rings animated film.
And Gollum's depiction is very different than this. This actually reminds me more of like the Gollum in the films we got with Peter Jackson.
A little bit more sympathetic.
Yeah.
Slightly. We are going to do the animated Hobbit at some point, the Rankin Bass one.
Oh man,
I haven't seen since I was a kid. I don't remember a whole lot about it.
Yeah, it's not great.
I don't think it's great, but it's all we had at the time.
But I wonder if, like, for this series, like, if people are like really, really big on like Black Cauldron series of Prydain and wanting to kind of explore that world, they're like, well, you know what? This is the only thing we have right now. And it's always what you're going to have because they're never going to touch this again.
No. Even though they reacquired the rights to this in 2016, they've done nothing with it. Yeah. Disney. So we get the little goblin thing who is the Horn King's assistant, Creeper.
Kind of a typical bad guy lackey.
Yeah. Pretty typical for Disney films, sure. And then, well, now we can talk about the Horn King.
Who is very atypical to Disney villains.
Right. I would say a visually interesting character, right?
The dude looks like Doctor Doom, but like with like horned and like a skull head.
Like if Doctor Doom and Skeletor had a kid.
Yeah, with just like the same maniacal level of like evil. Very pretty one-dimensional, you'd say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I said he's a visually interesting villain, but there's no real reason given for his actions just beyond being evil. It's not really clear what he wants.
Yeah, and especially interesting when you look at the other Disney animated films at the time, even before it. There's a bit more structure and a bit more depth to the villains. It's like it's very clear, like whether it's like Prince John, just very greedy, never gonna live up to King Richard. Or even like the Rescuers. I forget the name of like the lead there, but it's like, oh, she's just the villain there. She's just a huge bitch.
She wants that diamond, right?
Right. She wants a diamond.
Yeah, which is a clear motivation. Now you can say it's a one-dimensional motivation, but it's clearly defined. Or you get Ratigan in The Great Mouse Detective,
who a foil to Sherlock.
He's a foil to Sherlock. He basically, his motivation in that film is he wants to be the shadow ruler of the mouse version of the British Empire.
Right, which is pretty sick.
Right. But this guy, the Horn King, what does he want other than he wants to start a zombie apocalypse? I don't really know. They don't explain it.
But the visual, I think like there was probably like very like I'm just taking going on a limb thinking this visually. The direction could be, hey, like this looks evil and scary enough. Let's let that be enough, because
I think that's what they were banking on.
Because we're like, we don't have enough time to give them a proper backstory. We don't have time to show how destructive they can be. Everything that we do have to give more context to who they are is getting cut.
Not even the awkward John Huston narration in the beginning could explain it well.
No, but it's like that usually doesn't. It's it's really interesting. I'm like I waffle when it comes to exposition to like open movies. Either I really love it, a la Fellowship of the Ring,
right,
or I just really hate it, and it's just not effective, or like it just gives too much.
It's not effective here because you have John Huston who's completely wasted, and it could have been Taron asking like the Horn King, like, what can you buy that you don't already have? The future, Mr. Giddies. Oh wait, no, that's a different movie. That's Chinatown. He wants to control the water. Sorry, not that.
It's very different.
Yeah, sorry. Well, here's part of the other confusion I had, Anton. Maybe you can clear this up. So Dalwin and narrator John Huston in the beginning, they keep warning everybody about like what's going to happen if the Horn King returns, but he's just in his castle hanging out. So it's like he's still around? He's returned where?
Yes. And like that's where it's just not a good story. And we're asking the right questions that I'm sure people at that time asked the same questions, like who's the Horn King? Where was he? What did he do before? And look, if someone's looking at this as like a cult classic or as a misunderstood masterpiece, like that's a little heavy-handed. But
it's not.
You made a really good point about how it's really easy to see the film's end product and understand where the pitfalls were and to just think about what could have been. I think those are all very fixable things.
Yes. I think this film is way too short for what it wants to do. This is clearly a story that needed a much longer film to tell it.
Right. Like we don't need a rotoscope Battle of Helm's Deep at the end to like end the film. Oh wait,
we don't.
A different film.
Oh shit! Whoops. But it seems like if you're trying to adapt the source material, just pull one thing out of it. Instead, they were like, let's try to do 2 whole books.
Yeah, and I think that the ambition of going after high fantasy in this way and wanting to tell a level of depth into the story that's different from what Disney had been doing, I think that it's the right idea to want to try something different or to move in a different direction, because what they were doing wasn't working.
No, it wasn't.
But what we ended up getting was a splintered vision on how to execute it. And then it was basically just a delivery job at the end. And
you can tell it's chopped up, right? There's scenes that just end. There's really awkward transitions. When Taron gets tasked with taking Henwen to the Forbidden Forest, it just seems like there's a whole chunk missing. And then when they go to the fairyland and then that swamp, it's all happening really, really fast and not to the film's benefit. It almost creates the opposite of what we would describe as a pacing issue. Usually when we talk about pacing issues in film, we talk about how it's paced too slowly and it drags. This, I felt, was the opposite, where like, yeah, sure, it moved along briskly enough because it was 80 minutes, but there's so much jumping around. I don't know how much time went by in the story. Like, that's not clearly established. It just was way too quick.
Yeah, you know what? I'm actually starting to think of a film that I get reminded of when it comes to undertaking a much larger story and trying to condense it. And then the future vision was, hey, let's just make this multiple films, was Dune. Going back to like 1984, David Lynch's Dune. That was a lot of context being put into like one film.
And I haven't seen Lynch's one in a while, but I remember the first half of it being pretty close to the book, and then the second half they were just like, okay, just rush everything.
We don't have the budget to do a lot of the sandworm stuff in the desert. It's also a really long one. It's like 130 minutes. There really was like, I think like a look back with Denny's version of like, let's just make this a proper 2-film adaptation, which again, like,
thank goodness he did it.
But hey, like, look, it's a very different time. Reshoots are a bit easy, quote unquote, easier to do with today's technology. A lot of the films and scenes that really would have taken probably would have been even more expensive back then, much more doable now with special effects. So there was a lot of barriers there, in the same way that like the Black Cauldron, even if they wanted to tell a proper story exposition, putting themselves in such a hole production wise and within the timeline, there's no digging out of it. It's like either we cut it out and we just move on, because otherwise there's no way that we can revisit and, reshoot it. That's just not how it works.
That's pretty much what I took from Katzenberg speaking about this publicly. Is now he was speaking with many years of hindsight, but I kind of bought into what he was saying. He was speaking in front of like a live audience, and they asked him about this film, and he basically said, and not in so many words, that he knew that this film was doomed when he took over, and he was just trying to cut the losses and move on as quickly as possible.
Yep, I'm reading that.
And I can see that. Here's what the author of the books, Lloyd Alexander, had to say about it. Quote, "First, I have to say there is no resemblance between the movie and the book. Having said that, the movie in itself, purely as a movie, I found to be very enjoyable. I had fun watching it. What I would hope is that anyone who sees the movie would certainly enjoy it, but I'd also hope they'd actually read the book. The book is quite different. It's a very powerful, very moving story, and I think people would find a lot more depth in the book." End quote. Well, he's being very polite.
Yeah, being very polite.
Because this movie sucks.
Yeah,
I'm not hiding my opinion on it. Like, this is a stink bomb.
It is not good. All right? Like, there's no getting around that. It is not good.
Do you hope they would ever redo it and do the books justice? Because the books have a lot of fans, and most of the fans of the books are seemingly very unhappy with what Disney has done with this.
I mean, I do think that they have the rights. I do think that it would probably be more well suited as like a Disney Plus streaming series. I can see it now, the Black Cauldron. It's a big event.
Kind of like Willow.
Right. But I don't know if like the interest is all there.
I don't think it is. I was trying to figure this out, and I don't know how to quantify it, because you can't just go off of book sales. I don't know how popular these books are in 2025.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I do think that the subject matter of high fantasy is still very popular. We have that enough with like there's pretty high streaming numbers for Rings of Power. There's still across any like very popular like high fantasy or fantasy property, like it's still there. I just think that we also live in a day and age where most studios would rather just continue a winning horse rather than like a new idea or like take a risk. It's a lot harder. And especially like a company like Disney, I don't know if they'd want to retread that path.
They reacquired the rights about 10 years ago. And as far as I know, as of this recording, they still have them. So,
well, to be fair,
it may happen.
Maybe they're just trying to prevent someone from using the Black Cauldron for evil, like it was used.
We can't have John Hurt throw a dead body into it. By the way, that was. Did you enjoy that part about the Horn King? At least the John Hurt vocal performance.
It's neat, sure. Like
I didn't.
It's all right. It's fine.
It's fine. The dialogue that he recorded, it has the same echoey effect in every environment of where his character is, unlike the other characters, which don't. I wonder if they were doing that as an artistic choice to make his character's voice distinct, but it comes across as cheap to me.
I mean, that's not the only thing that comes off as cheap in the film.
It does not. Based on everything we're talking about, and like this would fail if it came out today. Like it's so easy to see why this failed in 1985. Like the story isn't there.
Yeah,
it's tonally. I mean, I know it was rated PG. I know they were trying to appeal to teenagers, but that wasn't Disney Animation's wheelhouse in 1985. Do you give them credit for trying darker material?
Yeah, and like it makes sense, like I think creatively, to want to break away from what they had been doing up to that point. And I do see the vision, especially when it comes to the success that we've seen with other fantasy properties with a proper adaptation. I just think that the appetite from the timing and overall timeline that occurred just buried this and never gave it a chance to really become a good film. So it's always going to stand the test of time of as a more of just like a warning, right? Like it's more of like, hey, like don't do any of this. And I feel like Disney's never approached anything close stylistically. The closest thing, funny enough, we mentioned his name earlier, and it was a huge risk for the studio, was to invest in The Nightmare Before Christmas under a young animator, Tim Burton.
That was later, though.
It was in '93.
Yeah, Tim
Yeah,
Burton was a
yeah.
very big name by that point.
He was, but if you, especially when you look at what Disney had been working on, nothing dark like that.
No, and the difference with The Nightmare Before Christmas is that I think it was Touchstone.
Yes, under a different banner.
Yeah, I think they didn't put the Disney name officially on.
So you can see there's still a lot of trickle down from like their aversion to like, hey, we can't do anything too different. I remember in the behind the scenes, and just I don't want to talk about Nightmare Before Christmas too much, but even that film, like there has during the production process, there was a lot of lobbying that they had to do to be like, hey, this vision is very spooky. It's very like dark. I know that that's not what we do typically do at Disney, but like this is gonna do well, and this is the vision why. If you push that forward, if you have someone at the helm like that's able to really fight for it, like you anything with a strong vision at the end of the day, it's going to feel more sincere and full. This didn't have anyone that was able to really fight for it through the end.
This had a mess of a screenplay. The Nightmare Before Christmas is a very singular story that they wanted to tell, whereas this, I understand why it failed. I really do, because there's a lot of creepy stuff in this film. So little kids were scared by it, apparently. You know, there's not a lot of comic relief in it either, and it's just hard to hold that note for 80 minutes.
I think like it's almost a really good example of a film that took itself almost too seriously, even with The Remnants. There was just a like you said, a lack of comedic relief. There absolutely is some, just not very good.
Try. Yeah, they try. I respect it as an outlier, but not much else. Next reason, let's talk about the visuals, because one of the things you can usually count on with a Disney animated feature is top tier animation, beautiful visuals. It's pretty inconsistent here. I mean, I think the animation in some of the scenes is very effective, you know, particularly when the undead army rises. You know, when the Horn King is resurrecting them, he is an outstanding visual character. I mean, that sequence is very, very memorable. I will give it that. I think with a lot of Disney animated films, I thought the production design was good. You know, I like the designs of the characters. I like the landscapes. I like the castles, stuff like that. But it's really inconsistent in a lot of the scenes, just in terms of the quality of animation.
Yeah, and at this point, too, Disney's animation quality was questionable. Not the peak. You do get a few films beforehand, right? Like, I think immediately right before was Fox and the Hound. And like even then, like that film's not stylistically like the most impressive animated film, but visually so many films from that era of Disney are well known for not having like the best animation. And then especially when you move down like in into the late 80s, early 90s, you see a huge shift, right? We said it before the recording. The Great Mouse Detective was immediately after this, very different, right? And it looks a lot more modern.
Smaller budget, too. Much smaller.
Yeah. It's nuts how even, you know, I watched it really recently, Oliver and Company, a few years after that. It looks a lot more modern. It still has its inconsistencies, and I can see why it's considered a lower tier Disney film, but it sticks to a very more familiar formula and a stylization that's, again, a bit more modern, especially compared to the Black Cauldron. To be very fair, the whole look and feel was an investment from like almost a decade previous.
There's entire scenes in this film where it feels like they cut and pasted animation from another film into this one. You know, I think the most egregious for me is when they go to Fairyland. It's like washed out and like a faded looking aesthetic to it, and I don't know. I don't think it was intentional on their part. It looks like it was added at the 11th hour. I suspect that was one of the things that they reanimated, probably for cheap. because it looks like crap.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. Like when you think about, I always like to pay attention to the backgrounds in this era of Disney. Even like going into Fox and the Hound, even a bit earlier with the Rescuers. If you look at the backgrounds, it's like the difference between like care and attention for a scene where you know the animators are making it look and feel more alive. You can really see it in this film, right? Where they really put a lot of work into either making the Cauldron Born scenes like very animated with the background, the Horn King scenes. I feel like it's any scene that really focuses on the villains actually felt more alive even with the background.
Yeah. And even some of the some of the characters, to your point, are drawn very sharply, and then others are like fuzzy.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're on screen at the same time next to each other, and it's really noticeable. And the thing that bugged me the most, I texted you about this. It's so sloppy looking. There are visible like matte cell lines flashing throughout the film in almost every scene.
Flat like floating lines. It's very distracting.
Yeah. Look, I know that happens in a lot of older 2D animated films, so I don't want to single this film out as being the only offender of it, but considering the amount of money that they spent to make this film, I was very surprised by it because it's just in way too many scenes for it to be excusable.
It's especially egregious when we think about the original vision was so ambitious to then just have a very poorly made execution. And even then, like you made a really good point, you don't see the same sloppiness out of a film like Great Mouse Detective.
No, which I watched right after this with my nieces because they were quite bored by this, and then we watched the Great Mouse Detective. They loved it. Their eyes were glued to the screen.
From my point earlier, I'll just say this: two very different situations. You don't have a rush job with a Great Mouse Detective. It's like very clear what the assignment is, and there's no overblown budget with just how to execute and then just make very stylistic and cute mouse Sherlock Holmes film versus this was kind of a jumbled mess.
What'd you think of the score?
I just think like it was so flat, which is really interesting because I feel like with high fantasy, you need something that breathes life into the background because they're always work in tandem together, the strength of the music to really enhance a film.
Yeah, I mean, I hate saying it because it's Elmer Bernstein and he was a Hollywood legend, but it's not a very good score. We've mentioned the budget several times. I just want to put something into perspective with you regarding the budget.
Mm-hmm.
Because you shouldn't judge a film solely on its budget, but I think what happened with the budget of this film explains a lot of its problems. They originally approved $25 million, but because of all the edits and the additional work, it nearly doubled to $44 million. Not only was it the most expensive animated movie ever made at the time, it was by far the most expensive movie of 1985. Not even animated movies, any movie.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Anton, nothing else came close. Just for some context, here are the other so-called expensive movies of the year. I'm gonna tell you the name of the movie and how much it cost. So Rambo, First Blood Part 2, $25 million. A View to a Kill, $30 million. Back to the Future, $19 million. Rocky 4, $28 million. Out of Africa, $31 million. None of them came close to this. The Black Cauldron.
Yeah. And all the years in development.
Insane.
Yeah, all the years in development, all of the sunk cost into the animation, technology. You can see it. You can see the cost ballooning, right?
This cost more to make than the following films of the era. The Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Blade Runner, Return of the Jedi, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Ghostbusters, Top Gun, RoboCop. This had the same budget as Heaven's Gate, and it had almost the same budget as Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade and the first Batman.
Man, talk about Heaven's Gate. Almost ended the studio.
It did end the studio.
Yeah.
They got bought out by MGM.
That's true. Oh, you're right. Dang, United Artists.
It did end the studio. It killed United Artists.
That's right. But like, it killed United Artists, but they still ran under the MGM umbrella, right?
They did, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you factor in the Black Cauldron is 80 minutes long, including the credits, this cost Disney about $500,000 a minute.
It's rough. Rough times.
It's nuts.
But I think like they knew it. and
They
that's
did.
why
Yeah.
they knew it, and that's why at the end of the day, like, why bother releasing it? I think like that's another question.
By that point, they were so far into it, they were just kind of like, screw it.
Like, why not just do a write-off? It seems like it's what industries are doing now, right?
I think if the Eisner takeover had happened like a year or two before 1984, they probably would have just killed it.
Yeah.
But by that point, they had already probably animated most of it. Oh no, we know they did because they had the test screening right after Eisner and Katzenberg took over. So by that point, the film was more or less made.
Yeah, it's tough too because there weren't a lot of great animated films US side that were released that year that were very good. No, but you go, overseas, Japan definitely had some really great classics that were released in 85 or even just in that same era around the 80s. That's when you're getting classics like Vampire Hunter D, some of the classic Studio Ghibli films as well, which it's been known, of course, like all top animation studios look at each other, but especially with that cost, it's just so disappointing.
It's nuts. It's. I mean, critics didn't love this either. It has a 56% Rotten Tomatoes score. This is the funniest thing to me. The Care Bears movie was the highest grossing animated film of 1985.
That doesn't shock me.
That cost $2 million to make.
Does not shock me. It's
so
a phenomenon.
The Black Cauldron was not only outgrossed by the Care Bears movie, it was also outgrossed by Disney's own re-release of 101 Dalmatians. That's awful.
Yep, that's bad.
Here's some other time and context for you in the history of Disney. They released this about a month after Return to Oz, which was another failure, another attempt at fantasy by the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that film has had a much different legacy over time. I think that film is generally pretty well regarded at this point, 40 years later.
Right. Definitely. Two very different situations.
Yeah. Well, also a very troubled production, though.
Right.
But that is a film we're going to review at some point. It is on our list, and actually, I'm looking forward to talking about that because I think that film is more misunderstood than it is bad.
Right. Whereas this film is bad, and I'm not going to say misunderstood, but had a lot not going for it.
You could say misunderstood. I mean, you wouldn't be wrong to say it.
I mean, what is there to like really? What is there to misunderstand though? Like, it's very clear. Like, there was no real intention to put out a quality film by Disney by the time this was by the time that they were shipping this out.
No, that's I agree with you. I think they misunderstood their target audience. They thought this would appeal to teenagers, or maybe, I don't know.
Actually,
it's hard to say.
And that's where too. Like, I think that if I went into the shoe, if I'm like thinking for myself from like the original, what is it, the 11 Old Men, and I'm thinking, where do I want to take the direction of the animation?
You mean the ring wraiths who were gifted the rings by Sauron?
Exactly. I do think that it's with this line of thinking of, let's make just like a good film. If it appeals to kids, it appeals to kids, but we're going to make a good animated film and try to make like a more complete story, and it may touch on things that are a bit more adult. I think we've talked about this subject matter before of like, how do you tell like a good children's movie, but it's within the context of it, or how do you tell a good movie within the context of an animated film, which is usually associated with a kid's movie. But if that was true intention, again, this is all conjecture. If there was true intention, you're not getting buy-in from the studio for that. You are not.
And this was such a low point in the studio's history because we know the era before this film came out, they knew how to do that. And then they knew how to do it in the Renaissance, the era after this. They figured it out again.
Right.
I think there's a very clear delineation between, you pointed this out to me at some point in one of our many, many countless discussions about Disney, offline and just on previous episodes, where it took them a long time to recover from the death of Walt Disney. In fact, they didn't recover from it until the Renaissance.
Yeah. And this is still a sign of lack of direction.
Yeah, this is the nadir of that. I mean,
Yeah.
this almost killed off animation for Disney, which is almost impossible to imagine now. But Michael Eisner actually considered shutting down the animation altogether. He didn't
Yeah.
think it could remain profitable. And in fact, a film that we've mentioned a couple times already today, The Great Mouse Detective, which came out the following year, that did well enough that it convinced Eisner that maybe animation did have a future. And that set the groundwork for what would become the Disney Renaissance, starting with The Little Mermaid in 1989.
Yeah, I think that this will always be an example of what not to do, but I can't even think of, let's say, like, I wonder if even if they had gotten the proper support. When I say proper, I mean give them time, allow them to write the screenplay, multiple films. Like, I can't even really see a vision of Disney going in that direction of like investing so heavily in high fantasy. Like, I just don't see it.
I mean, maybe they'll attempt it again because they have the rights, but I don't see it either.
Yeah, especially when we've talked about, like, I think we mentioned in this episode, up to that point Disney had not made a sequel, right?
Right.
And so even if there was going to be support, this is from a book series that has multiple books within it. So,
and they weren't even thinking about sequels. They were like, well, let's just adapt 2 of the 5 books.
Yeah, so this was a very ambitious idea that was never, I hate to say it was never going to succeed, but I don't think it ever really had a chance.
I don't either. And Disney, you know, we mentioned they pretty much ignored this. It never had any kind of presence on physical media until 13 years after it was released in theaters. My family owned a lot of Disney on video when I was a kid. I knew a lot of people that did as well. I didn't really know anyone that owned this on VHS.
I'd like to give a shout out to the local public library for having this on VHS. But yeah, it's just not very good. But I do remember, again, watching it as a kid, having a lot of visuals stick with me. The scene with Gurgi throwing himself into the Black Cauldron.
Did you like it?
No, not particularly, but I didn't hate it. And I think like that's a really interesting take, is like, I remember all the films I hated as a kid, but I don't remember hating this one. And I think part of that just maybe has more so to do with like seeing there's a lot of examples here where you do see some care and attention. There's some, right? There's some little gems here and there. And I think those are the parts that really stuck with me.
Well, there's nothing egregious in it. I know what you mean when you say you didn't hate it. There's nothing offensive in this film for me. There's nothing I found outright horrible other than I just found the story to be a complete mess.
Right. And knowing that, and knowing the appeal to high fantasy, maybe just like, even this predates The Legend of Zelda. And that whole aesthetic.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, no, you're right. This would have been made before Zelda, because I think the first Zelda game was like 85, right? I think.
Because Legend of Zelda was released on the NES. I want to say it was
right around this time.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Are we right there?
I think we are.
The first Legend of Zelda was released in 1986. Okay, so
close.
So really interestingly enough, even like if you look at Terran and you kind of think it kind of looks like Link, who knows?
So Nintendo saw this movie and they were like, yes, that's what we need.
Or at least they even saw the value of this kind of property, right?
They did, for sure.
And like I that's why I think that there is definitely merit into, like, it was a good idea to want to adapt a story like this, because there is a huge appeal.
There is. And I think we can segue into something very interesting, which is the only time the Black Cauldron appeared at a Disney theme park as an attraction was in Tokyo Disneyland.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
They had something called Cinderella Castle Mystery Tour, which was operated from 1986 to 2006, and it involved a walkthrough of the castle dungeon featuring Disney villains. You had Maleficent.
Yeah.
Maleficent. Yes, that one. The evil queen from Snow White, and the Horned King. And the Cauldron is featured in the finale of that attraction. Now, I have never been to Tokyo Disneyland, but you can watch videos of this attraction on YouTube, and I don't think it's a coincidence that that was the only time that this film was ever really acknowledged by Disney.
Yeah, and I think that also, yeah, just highlights that there was something to the visuals being very striking and like being very memorable. And if anything, like that is the most memorable thing about the Black Cauldron, is just whether terrifying as the Horned King is, like it does have a tinge of that Disney design or memorability, if not just a terrifying composite Doctor Doom Skeletor.
And then, of course, the Horned King is defeated when he basically trips and falls into the cauldron.
Yeah, man, just so interesting. Would you watch a streaming series of the Black Cauldron?
I would watch the first episode to try it out.
Okay, all right. I think that I would also do the same. I'd give it a try.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how it goes, as long as it's not a live action adaptation.
Did you watch their attempt to bring back Willow?
I did on Disney Plus. Yeah.
They took it down, right?
Yeah, they did. No, it's not great. They also had did you see the Dark Crystal had a sequel?
I didn't see it, but I know of it.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
And of course, that wasn't really Disney to begin with. They just kind of hijacked that.
Because of all the Jim Henson.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think they own the rights to it.
Yeah. They bought it, I think, at some point.
But then, yeah, it's a very interesting fork in the road for Disney, this film.
Yes. I mean, I think we answered the question, why wasn't it better? Or at least we tried to answer it. You know, we talked about the lengthy, troubled production. We talked about the weakness of the story. We talked about the inconsistency of the visuals, how the budget worked against it, what its competition was, what they were trying to do. Let's give our ratings.
Yes, let's do it. You want me to go?
You can, yes. I know you're struggling with your dogs right now, so you let me know.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was a really interesting rewatch because I knew for a fact going into it, like it was going to be hard for me to separate my visual experience from my brain saying, this is going to be bad. There's going to be parts of this that are going to be just not good. And that was my experience. There was a lot of the same issues that we talked about with the inconsistency of the animation, lack of plot, characters that seemed very half-baked, poorly positioned exposition, not a great soundtrack or score. And I feel like when I view the film with just those aspects, you could almost, it also builds a laundry list of like very fixable aspects that I think with a full vision could have been a well executed high fantasy film. And that is also the pitfall of many folks as they probably think about this being a cult masterpiece, is that it was just maybe a few steps away from being a true vision of like, I do think a good idea, which is fantasy does really well. Fantasy under Disney could be really, really great. Dark aesthetic, also Disney has shown they can do really well. It just takes a bit of a balance. So I think that there were so many learnings that you get from this film, but again, that doesn't really add to the film's score. That's just more so some observations and takeaways that you can really get from the film. It's really the film, the production process, it's all just more of a learning tool, like reader beware, choose your scare kind of situation. If you've listened all the way through and you're a Disney fan and you didn't know about it, I'm sure you're really fascinated. Go check it out on Disney Plus. Like I said, this is so much more interesting on the production and the history of the film than the actual film itself. I think objectively, I cannot give this film a very good score. I just don't think it's good. So unfortunately, I give this film an F. Like it's just not good. But I do think that there's so much to learn from this film and from the production that deserves multiple looks.
I agree with everything you said. I know this has a cult following. I just don't see the appeal. The story is very hard to follow, and I found the tone to be inconsistent. And I think it is a shame because, to your point, Anton, what we know about the novels, there is a lot of story material for them to adapt that they just did not do justice. The animation quality is wildly uneven, and it only makes the budget more objectionable. The harshest thing that I can say about this film is that if I hadn't seen Cinderella's Castle, in the opening credits, I would just assume this is knockoff Disney. It is well below their standard of quality. It is one of, if not the worst films that they have ever produced. It is very easy to see why this failed and why it represents the studio hitting rock bottom. It's just very bland and unremarkable. I don't judge movies based on what they might be, which I think a lot of people do when they're telling us this is some cult classic. It's this overlooked masterpiece. It's not. This is a complete mess. I judge films on what they are. And if you like it, you like it. I think this movie stinks. It is a turd. It's the worst Disney film I've ever seen that I can think of. If you're an enthusiast, you've probably seen this already. If you haven't, and you're looking for an older animated film to check out, I can't recommend it because there wasn't really anything I liked about this film. There wasn't any moment where I'm like, wow, that made it worth it for me to invest 80 minutes of my time. It was a waste of time for me. The only reason this movie matters, in my opinion, is because it gave Disney the wake-up call that it needed. The positive takeaway with this is that it flopped so badly that it caused them to completely reevaluate their animation department, and that ultimately led to the Renaissance. So I'm grateful in that regards, because if this film hadn't failed, we probably don't get the most successful period in Disney's history, or at least maybe not in the way that we did. This is absolutely an F. Now, there's obviously scales to F. We've talked about this. If you're like grading it on like a test, an F could be anywhere from like 0 to 59. This is not near 0. I've seen way, way worse films than this. But I do think it's a failure at pretty much every level.
One last question. Would you rather see this or live action Snow White?
Well, I've never seen live action Snow White. But if you're giving me the choice, like right now, like what would you rather watch? I'd probably pick this.
Yeah. And it's funny, right? I think I had to quickly like remind myself of like it could always be worse. Those are two very different films. I don't think it's a very serious question because it's like the context is so different. But I think we're also at a very same period of time for Disney of like what we're doing is not working. And Snow White could be the Black Cauldron of live action Disney.
I have a feeling Snow White will be remembered like that. Like, thank goodness that movie failed so badly because it caused Disney to pivot.
Yeah.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see.
One could hope. One could hope.
Maybe we'll cover that at some point, this Snow White movie that came out earlier this year. I don't know. I'm not in any hurry to get to that, though.
I see you're trying to make me sick, Pat.
Well, this wasn't the easiest watch, I have to say.
No, it wasn't.
I don't know if we talked about this previously in the episode, but like, were you mostly just bored by it?
Yeah. And like, it's just not much to really go on.
Well, that's it for the Black Cauldron. I have nothing else to say.
And then that would be, okay, we were visually... We're just going to end the clip here with Gurgi falling into the cauldron, and that's the end of the episode.
That's the end of the episode. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.